Okay. Welcome back to Signals from Simulacra. I'm Bryceson, and today is another show. Regrettably, I have not had a show in quite some time. When was the last show? I want to say it was April 17th, and now it is May 9th. But I have been cooking up. There are some things that are live. If you've seen some of the videos on my YouTube channel, but we're back with another show. And we're going to be much more consistent with the shows. But today's show, I think, is a pretty good show. And I think is a show and a topic that is not talked about as much in the American system, the American political educational system. Let me not say political, but let's say the corporate educational system, in that asymmetric outcomes are what's going to really put you into that exponential stratosphere, and then also give you the ability to take control of your really like destiny in a sense. And in general, the current elementary school to middle school to high school to college and then 9 to 5 pipeline, none of it is asymmetric. It's all very linear. It's a very linear, slow progression. And there wouldn't be a problem with that if the central government and the central banks weren't printing money. But when you have people climbing up the ladder in a linear fashion, and it's not like it's a linear line with a steep slope, so the increments in their life are gradual. You supposedly get your high school education and then your college degree, and then you're supposed to get this job, and then now you can afford a new car, and then now you can afford a new house. It's a very linear progression, which is pretty much unattainable now, even so, due to money printing is really the problem, due to money printing. And so today's show, Bitcoin and asymmetric outcomes, I'm detailing why Bitcoin itself is a asymmetric outcome, and why you and I should pursue asymmetric outcomes in our life. And not just in a professional sense, but in everything you do. Chapter 1: Bitcoin and asymmetric outcomes. So, we have this cycle of, let's say, learning, but it's going to be a cycle, and at the end of that cycle we reach an asymmetric outcome. Usually people would probably stop by have fear, and then they would go to uncertainty, and then they might grow, they might learn from it, but they didn't really take a path that would lead them to an asymmetric outcome of growth. They had linear growth. And fear is really arguably the most powerful human emotion. It drives us, it's carnal. It harkens back to hundreds of thousands of years of simply, wow, that bush around the corner, behind the bush is some berries, but it's really dark and I don't know what's behind that bush over there. I'm probably not going to go over there because I have fear of the uncertainty. And at the root of it, that's a lot of what fear is. It's fear of the uncertainty. And it could be fear of things that have happened before and you know are going to happen before. But I would say a lot of times people have fear of uncertainty. And so we have a cool little graphic here. It's the levels of fear from least intense to most intense. And so you have trepidation, nervousness, and anxiety, and dread. I would say all of us have kind of felt those emotions, whether it's the night before a big exam and you definitely barely studied, or maybe you studied a lot and you are just a bad test taker, or the night before an interview, or the day after you had the interview and you have a lot of anxiety and dread about the outcome that is going to come from this potentially life-changing interview that you just had. And so I imagine that a lot of us operate pretty much on a daily to weekly basis in trepidation to anxiety, let me say. You might not have dread on a daily basis or a weekly basis, but at least trepidation to anxiety. And I think at the most intense levels, I think that's a different conversation for what I'm talking about today. I'm more so talking about least intense to this middle right here in anxiety. And really I'm talking about in pursuing things that you might have a fear of doing, or pursuing things that intuitively you understand and know, something's not right here, but you have some sort of trepidation, nervousness, anxiety about stepping out and realizing you're inside the matrix, really. And so the function of fear, is really just to reduce harm, to avoid or reduce harm. Fear is also physical. We have a typo right here. Let's fix that. So first of all, fear is physical. And then the function of fear is to avoid or reduce harm. I go back to the bush example, where you don't know what lurks around that bush, but your stomach's rumbling and you're hungry. And so what do? There's risk involved. And I want to argue today that more often than not, any situation, there's less risk involved than you actually think there is. And I think that that's easier said than done in 10,000 BC when, if I go around the corner and something bites at me and now I have this wound, well, any type of wound is potentially fatal. But today, I think a lot of people, especially in the United States, I'll talk for the United States, are very afraid of uncertainty, afraid of loss. They have loss aversion. They're afraid of looking kind of stupid, especially in public, and especially to people's whose opinions they care about. And so a lot of times they move to reduce harm. I think a lot of things aren't really that scary when we just really take the initiative and dive into whatever project that you have been holding off on and putting off. Avoiding or reducing harm. That's what we're doing. That's what fear is doing. And fear can make things very foggy, which leads to an action. And I think that's a lot of reason why people don't start the things that they're interested in. And it doesn't have to be a business. It could be the smallest thing, like some hobby. And even if the hobby is done in private, say it's you always wanted to learn the saxophone. And that's done in private. You might have a private instructor, but other than your instructor, no one else is going to know that you're really bad at the saxophone at first. And so, but you don't start. And it's not that you don't start because it's a fear of being laughed at in public. It's also a fear and a function to avoid or reduce harm. And the harm being the self-esteem loss of starting something and not finishing it, or never starting something at all. And it's almost like if you don't even start it, you can't really hurt yourself in a way. Fear can make things really, really foggy. And it leads to a lot of inaction. And the US dollar's precipitous decline in purchasing power over the last century and the state of most of the socioeconomic realities of most Americans is from a state of fear. But the problem is the US dollar has pretty much been made into God because it's your time and energy. It's your time and energy and creativity in whatever you do. Even if you think you're doing something that is not creative, you're still focusing your energy on something. And so your energy has been turned into a monopoly money that you can, I guess, go buy groceries with. I mean, it's kind of an insane system. Your energy is being stolen and trapped in a petrodollar, but they have access to the money printer. You know, it'd be one thing if you were taking your skills being a carpenter and you were buying gold and no one is diluting the gold. No one is just making more gold. No one has gone to the moon or Mars or whatever planet and found just a whole lump of gold. Your energy is stored. Your energy is stored. Your energy is not being wasted. But now it is being wasted. And I think that it's also really difficult, I imagine, to then go and act on something that you've always wanted to do when the potential consequence is that your actual energy is sucked from you, i.e., you lose money. And that brings me to chapter 2 of Bitcoin and asymmetric outcomes. Uncertainty. Uncertainty is not risk. I think this is probably the best chapter from Bitcoin is Venice. I will put Bitcoin is Venice in the references of the description of this video. But uncertainty is not risk. This is a really good quote. Many idle controversies involving the nature of expectation could be avoided by recognizing at the outset that man's conscious actions are the reflection of his beliefs and nothing else. Your conscious actions are the reflections of your belief and nothing else. As in, you have certain beliefs, and that influences your everyday decision making. but those beliefs can be challenged. And by doing things that are uncertain is a really good way to challenge those beliefs. But a lot of people do not take the risk because they think, damn, I don't know, it's very uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen. What about 5 years from now? What about this? It might be too saturated. But uncertainty is not the risk. We are here because of risk. Everyone before you took some sort of risk. Every empire, every blossoming city-state that turned into an empire took a risk. Some paid off, some didn't. But the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen is not the inherent risk in any given situation. And this book, Against the Gods, The Remarkable Story of Risk, is so good. It's such a good book about perspective, risk, outcomes, and just thinking about your life and the world and the different human stories from across the geographical spectrum in a different light. And it really makes you think about how you approach risk, uncertainty, loss aversion, how you go about predicting the future performance of any given action. And so I'm going to open up. I bookmarked a couple of passages. Let's see. All right, so here's one. In terms of risk aversion, we display risk aversion when we are offered a choice in one setting, and then turn into risk seekers when we are offered the same choice in a different setting. We tend to ignore the common components of a problem and concentrate on each part in isolation. I feel like a lot of people are very susceptible to that, where in one instance, justifiably so, if you're really good at chess, you're going to maybe take more risky moves than a novice who doesn't really know the rules. But that same chess player, when playing, who knows, when the same chess player, when fencing, if they're fencing somebody, if they're a novice in fencing, they will be way less risk adverse. Oh, I'm not going to step this way. I'm not going to step that way because I might get stabbed. And so that's a very important note in you. If you know which situations you are a risk seeker and which situations you are risk averse, then you can start to put yourself in situations that will grow your comfort bubble, essentially. If you know you're really bad at this one thing, then go out and do it. And even better, do it in public. Especially if you're learning while you are doing the thing that you are not good at and you are naturally risk averse to. All right, second, the asymmetry between the way we make decisions involving gains and decisions involving losses is one of the most striking findings of prospect theory. We make decisions involving gains and decisions involving losses differently. And so whenever you're thinking about starting anything, I don't think a lot of people think about the potential gains of it first. I think they think about all the things that could go wrong due to uncertainty and then due to the fear that uncertainty induces. But as we talked about before, uncertainty is not risk. And so, again, if you know how you make decisions involving gains and make decisions involving losses, and which situations you're risk adverse and which situations you're a risk seeker, you can then really start to really be proactive and formulate how you go about starting anything or really interacting with anybody, and essentially just constantly become a better version of yourself. And that's when the compounding will start, and that's when the asymmetrical outcomes will come. So we have two more passages. Right here it says, probably the most significant and pervasive characteristic of the human pleasure machine is that people are much more sensitive to negative than to positive stimuli. That's going back to you make different decisions based off potential gains or losses. Think about how well you feel today, and then try to imagine how much better you could feel. There are a few things that would make you feel better, but the number of things that would make you feel worse is unbounded. The number of things that would make you feel worse is unbounded. And that unboundedness, uncertainty, is what drives people's fear and not starting things, going after the things they want. It is the notion that all the things that could go wrong and could make you feel worse or put you in a more worse position than you are now are unbounded. There's no cap to the bottom, I guess, technically. For most things, I think for a lot of things, there's probably some cap to where you can't be any more embarrassed, can you? And so that people are more sensitive to negative than to positive stimuli. Probably the most significant and pervasive characteristic of the human pleasure machine. And so the human pleasure machine, what gives us dopamine, the chemicals that go off in our brain that say, wow, I feel good when I do this. It's more receptive to negative stimuli, as in, I feel terrible when I do this. I don't want to feel that feeling again. And as humans, we move towards comfort. We move towards not feeling worse than we've ever felt instead of feeling better than we've ever felt. And then the last passage, we tend to believe that information is a necessary ingredient to rational decision making, and that more information we have, the better we can manage the risks we face. Yet psychologists report circumstances in which additional information gets in the way and distorts decisions, leading to failures of invariance and offering opportunities for people in authority to manipulate the kinds of risk that people are willing to take. That's super interesting. More information does not necessarily mean you will make a better decision. And I think all of us have come across this intuitively, where you feel like you're overwhelmed by the amount of options you have. Or you might be overwhelmed by the amount of information of potential losses or potential risks that are associated with anything you're doing. And so really, by shifting your mindset into not thinking about the risks, and that doesn't mean you should just push the risk to the side, but categorizing it, containerizing the risk, putting them in a space where you can check on them, you can attend to each one, but you can also rank their risk or rank their level of something poorly going wrong. And if you rank that and you say, wow, I mean, it's really not that bad. Like, for instance, I'm making this YouTube video right now, and I post it, and it could get 1 view. It could get no views. Okay? The level of loss or the consequences of putting out the YouTube video. Now, unless I was, saying things in this video that are like offensive to people or that are vulgar, then yeah, the consequences on the bottom side are more unbounded. But uniformly, if I'm creating a video about how to go after things using a asymmetric outcome mindset, it's probably not going to get flagged for any offensiveness. And so the risk of putting out YouTube videos is really low, but the potential asymmetric outcome of it is very high. Embrace uncertainty. Uncertainty, how you embrace uncertainty is ask, what is to be done next? And then you just do it. And then you repeat. And then when you do it, you get information. And remember, more information is always not better information, or more information doesn't always help you make better decisions. But you do it, you get information. You do it, you get information. I should have information right here. This is not my napkin that I wrote on. You do it, you get information, and then you repeat to hopefully improve whatever situation you are in. And then with that new situation you're in, or the same situation you're in, but with the new information that you got, you can better embrace the uncertainty and then ask, what is it to be done next again, and then do it again and get more information. And that's where we get into chapter 3. Bitcoin and asymmetric outcomes. Chapter 3 is growth, taking action, and the Pareto Principle. You got to take action. The only way to have an asymmetric outcome is to take action. It's the classic. It's really the classic Shia LaBeouf meme. Just do it. You got to do it. And the Pareto Principle is so informative, and you see it in really everything that we come across in life and in nature. And so quite simply, the Pareto Principle is the observation that although there are often many causes for any observed phenomena, it is often the case that a small subset of those causes are responsible for most of the observation. And we can use this as a schoolyard grounds kind of thought process, as then there's only a few bad kids, but the bad kids are representation of the entire classroom, So if the principal's coming to the teacher's classroom and the teacher's telling everybody, behave, and they have a classroom of 30 kids and 5 of the kids are acting up, well, that's going to be acting up in the school's eyes. I think that what we think of children acting up is a whole different conversation, and also goes to the elementary school to secondary school to corporate, and then the virtue holders pipeline. It goes into that pipeline. But the Pareto Principle is just saying that it's often the case that a small subset of those causes are responsible for most of the observation. And so you can apply that to the things that you do, in that probably 20% of your input is going to be the cause for 80% of the output. And so you just got to do it. Keep working, keep being consistent, knowing that as long as you keep showing up every day with the mindset of having an asymmetrical outcome, I think that exponential rise will occur. Power laws. So power laws can apply to asymmetrical outcomes. But power laws, I think, are very interesting in terms of distribution. And I think power laws are very good to think about in terms of where do you want to concentrate your time. And so on the top, you see a normal distribution of the average firm size. But when you go to the distribution by power law, you see a lot of these firms are very small. They're white. And then a lot of these firms are massive. They're red, they're deep, deep red, and then they're also coming out of the distribution. They're going up into 3D space. They're massive. And this could be certain industries, this could be certain firms in an industry. But you want to make sure that you are putting yourself in situations that follow power law distribution. Are you doing something in an industry where your output is not going to be normally distributed? Your output is going to be exponentially distributed. You're going to see 2, 4, 10, 20x your output that you put in for the input. And so remember to think about power law distribution when you are looking at friends to be around, books to ingest, content to look at. Everything follows a power law distribution. What things are going to most often lead to those asymmetrical outcomes? Chapter 4 of asymmetric outcomes. And this is where we get into what an asymmetrical outcome is. Essentially, there are situations where you can either have a small reward and a big risk, or a small risk but a big reward. So a small reward but a big risk might be robbing a bank. Yeah, you might get out with $1 million, but it's a very, very big risk, and the likelihood of that risk turning out to be true is very high. Versus starting a YouTube channel is very small risk. It doesn't take any money, really. You can use your iPhone or your laptop to record. You don't have to use a microphone. I would use a microphone on YouTube unless you want to, get a comment saying this. Oh, well, no, that's for bad visuals. You don't want to get a comment. You have bad visuals and you get a comment on your YouTube video saying this looks like it was filmed with a potato. That's old YouTube comment. But audio is the worst thing you can have in putting out any sort of content to people. But in general, it doesn't cost really anything to create a YouTube channel. It's free, essentially. And there's pretty big reward. The risk is no one watches it, and I don't know, you have a fear of people thinking no one watches your videos. Yeah, no, the reward is pretty big. You could go to any hobby. You always wanted to learn the saxophone. The risk to not learning is small, or the risk to failing is very small, but the reward is very big. And the reward doesn't have to be monetary. The reward can be personal satisfaction. The personal satisfaction of learning an instrument that you've always wanted to learn, and you being able to play it in front of someone, and they think you're a seasoned player. There's a big reward with the personal satisfaction with yourself of doing something like that. And so you want to pursue things that have asymmetrical risk with small risk. You want to pursue things that have asymmetrical outcomes. Small risk, big rewards. I think we're going to end it here. I think that was a good show. I appreciate everyone today. You're watching another Signals from Simulacra. Do I want to get into some shameless plugs? I think I'm going to get into shameless plugs. Okay, so first of all, community pool is live. Let's go to the community pool. Can we go here? Community pool. Oh, yeah. Community pool is live. Wait, go back. Community pool is live. Digital treasuries for every community. Make sure if you want to fund any event, outing, community project, you're using community pool. You're funding with digital assets, with tokenized gold and Ethereum. You have more control over your money. It's way faster. If you deploy a community pool, you can get your funds in seconds. You don't have to wait for a bank. You don't have to wait to be approved. It's global. Just because you are in a country that is ostracized from the current petrodollar system, you can still use tokenized assets if you have an internet connection. And so, community pool, digital treasuries for every community, go check it out. I want to say that's the only shameless plug I have. No, I think that's the only shameless plug I had. Yeah. So I think this is going to be the end of today's show, but these shows are going to become consistent. 100%. 100%. Weekly shows, hour long. As we grow more, I'll start doing them live and getting, some questions from the audience. But I appreciate everyone for tuning in to Simulacra and another show, Signals from Simulacra. I'm Bryceson. Remember to like, subscribe, send to your friends, family, all that jazz. And I'm out. See ya.